Welcome back to another reading and correcting of The Used Child by me, Sinar, the Tiger Writes, and Ty, the Tiger Supervisor. Today we are doing Chapter 19. The ship's vibration dropped to a barely perceptible level under Tristan's feet as he shut off the engines. He brought up the view from the cameras and saw nothing but distant stars. Their employer had picked a spot in an outer part of a dead system off any of the lane's space after. Nothing, Alex said, lowering his voice. There's no ship within range. Tristan turned to stop the human for giving away their position. I didn't think he'd shut down the engine because he wanted quiet. He saw the screen, saw Alex had only used passive sensor. He found that he was impressed with this forethought. He shook away the sense. It didn't say anything other than he had more common sense than the humans Tristan had been forced to work with previously. He relaxed as Alex turned. No sense putting the human on edge, but it was something Tristan would do himself. You think he'd be waiting for us, right? For the kind of money he's paying? I'd have expected him to get here right after hiring you and wait. Tristan nodded. He looked over the scan. Alex had been right. Nothing out there emitting power except them. Take the boy out of cryo and see to it he doesn't get in my way. He began shutting down systems. He didn't like this. Sure, if they manned the scan and they couldn't be surprised by anything, in that sense it was a decent meeting place. But there was nothing to take cover behind if something showed up. When he heard the boy speak, he did a hard shutdown of the cryo system. Even on standby, it drew more power than any of the other systems on the ship. He looked at the scans again, looking for the faintest indication of power. Nothing. Alex's point was valid. Where was the man who wanted this boy? With nothing else to do, Tristan did the maintenance he could from inside the ship. With that done, he checked on the main message nodes he had set up for his contacts. Stood up information about new technology. One of them had a file on the Goliath-class warship from Herberu. Last he'd heard, the Goliath class was being phased out of production, but this file contained blueprints with highlighted upgrades to the design. First look, the modification made sense, so he sent the payment. He discovered this was a forgery. He'd pay that contact a visit and ask for an explanation. For the time being, he studied the plan eagerly and read the attached specification. Alex returned to his seat after making sure the boy was settled in the one room with a bed on the ship. He commented on how the boy was reading before asking for permission to access the net. With his earpiece in, when Tristan nodded, then he was talking softly as he looked through one network system after the other. Tristan watched him work, captivated with the ease the human coded and made his way through various systems. He couldn't follow most of the code, but he recognized the structure of command instructions as Alex inserted them there, the structure of what looked like sleeper code in another location. Tristan went back to reading, checking over the passive scans regularly. He had set them to sound an alarm, but he never trusted them enough to leave them unattended. After 24 hours, Tristan went over the passive scan system, physical and program. It occurred to him Alex might have been a plant and compromised them, but the humans couldn't wear a mask to save his life. Still, he looked for any indication he managed to slip code within the ship's system. It was untouched. After 36 hours, sleep became a concern. Alex had napped in his seat and once stretched on the floor for a few hours. Tristan hadn't left the control for more than taking care of the necessities. The longer it took for the employer to arrive, the more concerned he became, and less inclined he was to leave the scan unattended. Having Alex here meant he could leave the human to watch them while he slept, if he trusted him not to try something stupid, like getting into the ship system and putting in some of his own code. The other alternative was stims. He hated this stuff, but he could take them for 4 days with minimal effect to his judgment. Every few years, he tested himself to see how his tolerance changed over time. He took the injector out of the cabinet, where he kept the medical equipment, and gave himself a dose. He needed to decide what he'd do if the wait went past 4 days. On day 3, Alex's pacing was driving Tristan crazy. Why couldn't he be like the boy, sit quietly and read? Alex had intended to read their food earlier that day. Tristan had let him, since it meant that he didn't have to think about it. But that only took an hour. A year's worth of nutrient bars was easy to keep track of. Alex sat at the console, tapped commands in, looked at the screen, and got up. His steps sounded on the metal floor, and exactly 8 minutes later he returned. Tristan had found he couldn't keep himself from timing Alex, since he had nothing to do but watch the screen. The next time Alex returned, Tristan grabbed him and dragged him to the hold. It was just high enough for Tristan to stand, and there they fought. Alex had improved every time they fought, and now he gave Tristan a good fight, particularly his neck, groin, and stomach reflexively. He rarely exposed his back anymore, and got in a few good punches. Tristan called an end to the fight when Alex could barely remain standing. He pulled the roll from storage, handed it to the human with an order to sleep. Tristan went back to his seat and cursed himself. In his hurry to stop Alex's pacing, he began to transfer the sensor alarm to the hold, which meant that if the law had shown up, it would have been blown up before Tristan could do anything about it. He also forgot to lock the boy in his room. On day 4, he stood by the cabinet, looking at the injector in his hand. It was that or sleep. One meant leaving Alex unattended, the other meant having to trust that his judgment wouldn't be so hampered he couldn't handle whatever would happen. What? He growled at Alex, who'd stepped near him. You've been staring at that for 10 minutes now. I'm thinking sleep would be a better option. He rounded the human. And leave my ship for you to coerce? You really just walked up to me to tell walked up. You really just walked up to tell me that? Alex didn't react to the anger, and that pissed Tristan off. I've been standing right here for the whole 10 minutes. You just reacted to it. You just now reacted to it. Fuck! That made Alex take a step back, and Tristan found that funny. He kept himself from chuckling, or fixation, and losing track of what happened around him was the first sign he was pushing himself too far with things. He glared at Alex. Promise you, if I find any code in my ship I didn't put there myself, I am going to make you regret it. Didn't give the human time to reply. He headed down the hold, took out another bedroll, and lay down on it. He slept for 18 hours. When he woke, he scoured the system for any changes Alex might have made to it. Twice. For the next 5 days, they fell in a routine. Tristan slept. They kept busy until Alex grew restless, and then they trained, after which Alex slept. Once Alex woke, Tristan slept again, and they repeated the process. Throughout that, the boy only came out of the room to eat with them. Unlike Alex, he would eat his portion of the nutrient bars without complaint. On day 10, Alex had begun tapping his fingers on the console, the initial sign of his growing restlessness, but suddenly stopped. Tristan looked at him as Alex said, "Something's coming." Finally. Tristan didn't mind weights, they were part of the jobs, but this was ridiculous. Man, that ship's fast. Tristan snapped to attention and brought up the sensors. Alex whistled. That's a lot of power on that ship's emitting. A glance at the scan confirmed Alex's word. Tried for a visual scan, but the incoming ship was still too far. He recalled what he'd seen of their importer ship. Interesting job, the engine had pushed hard when taking off, but it had been controlled. It had power, but that kind of control came at the expense of speed. Extrapolation showed the ship was headed for them. He didn't want that. He brought up the active sensor, and before he'd read half the result, he was waking up the ship and moving them away as fast as it would go. Small, too damn small. What's going on? Alex asked. Tristan scanned the surrounding. Nothing in range. The closest planet would take hours to reach, and the readout of the other ship, it would be within firing range long before that. Who's that? Be quiet, Tristan growled. The screen flashed red as a point detached from the following ship. Too far to get a lock, so that was a smart missile. Crystal humans for preferring convenience over the practicality of having cover. He launched a heat flare and made a turn that stressed the dampener system. Heat sensors were the most common tracking system on smart missile. The missile ignored the flare to follow them. Smarter heat sensor? No, that would be locked onto the engine pattern and it had to change as he pulsed them. Electronic profile lock. He cursed, he hated those things. when he hated those things when used against him, which the system was using to stay on them. What can I do to help? Tristan wanted to kick him out of his cockpit. He had enough to do with keeping the missile from catching up with him and figuring out how to lose that lock. He couldn't just shut down a random system and hope that would work. What he needed was another set of hand to make a full scan of that missile and send me the result. Sends the result to my screen. Finally stopped feeling Alex's eyes on him as a human set to work. Detail scrolls down the secondary screen. The computer already had a match for it. Good. That meant something he'd taken apart. A beryllium chaser, a takedown missile. Please, the hit wouldn't be fatal in and of itself. It was designed for capture mission. Would disable the ship, leave them dead in space to be boarded. Except Mr. Pursuer wouldn't bother with that. The bad thing about the bad thing was that the beryllium had a customizable lock. There was no way to know which one it had settled on. The manufacturer had claimed that because of that, the missile couldn't be beaten. Yeah, this is clunkiness of early writing. The manufacturer claimed that made the missile unbeatable. They were wrong. Tristan had found a way. He just had. Our screen flashed red and he banked hard. It all registered the heat of a laser hit, but no significant damage. You want me to be quiet? Tristan banked, trying to guide the missile in the way of the laser, but it wouldn't. Wallingham did make their missile smart. I'm lied about that. You do know you're wasting your time, right? The voice that came off from the calm was calm. Tristan didn't recognize it, but he hadn't expected to. You can't outrun me or the missile, so why don't you stop trying? You'll be able to repair the damage once I got the kid and I'm gone. Tristan shut the calm down. When this was done, he'd have to explain to Alex about leaving communication system down. At least this told Tristan why the other ship was here. Disappearance would have been noticed in under a day. How long for them to accept that the driver whose hover they used wasn't responsible? How had Bismarck figured out where they'd be? Questions for later. First, get rid of the missile. Do the loop as tightly as the ship could stand and ended up behind the missile. That wouldn't break the lock, but the beryllium needed a wider arc to turn. Tristan fired on the ship he was now flying towards, jerking in all directions to keep his pursuer from getting a lock. He didn't hit the other ship, but that wasn't the point. What that other pilot knew, not that the other pilot knew that. Unlike him, Tristan had no need to keep him alive, so he had to act as if death was the intent and focus on evasion. Their ship crossed paths close enough they might have scraped the protective coating off in places. Tristan shut everything down, even life support. They became a piece of space junk on a ballistic trajectory toward infinity. They were blind, deaf, and if Tristan didn't do this properly, dead. Did something hit us? Alex asked. 15 seconds. The thing Tristan had discovered when he'd taken apart a beryllium chaser was that it was a genius of a missile. Beryllium had wanted it to be able to adapt to just about any situation. That meant the onboard AI knew that the ship's profile could be modified on the fly. His experiments had shown it took between 20 and 30 seconds for the AI to go through the calculations needed to reestablish a lock. 20 seconds. His pursuer might or might not know that, so he might not think to override the missile. Most were to use them, thought of them as a launch and forget system. But even if their pursuer knew about it, he'd be too busy trying to figure out what Tristan had done and why. 30 seconds. The one variable Tristan couldn't account for was the broad difference between the electronic profile of his ship compared to that of his pursuers. How much longer would the AI take to decide it was the new profile it needed to lock on? 35 seconds. Tristan hesitated. If the missile hadn't reset the lock, it would come back to them the instant he powered up. If he waited too long, even with the missile after him, his pursuer would be able to find him visually and shoot at the undefended target. 40 seconds. Tristan powered up and banked in the instant the ship was responsive. The screens came back, nothing red, nothing locked on. Sensor came back, and he found the other ship trying to outrun and outmaneuver the missile. He could outrun it. His ship was faster. Given enough time, the Merc might remember he had the override codes for the missile. If he was given time to think, Tristan had no plan on giving him that. Fired at the other ship and grazed it. The comm light flashed. In his perfusion, Alex looked at him, and then the light. Tristan ignored both, firing on the ship again. The ship dodged and vanished from the sensor. Really? Tristan thought, stealing my own trick without knowing why it had worked. Tristan locked on the missile while it was resetting and destroyed it. It only took a few seconds to find the ship using the cameras. He was tempted to wait until the Merc powered back up so he'd know he'd been bested before dying, but that was how stupid Mercs ended up dead. Tristan fired on the ship until it exploded. He smiled as the flame vanished and set a course to a location he would be able to regroup and work out how this had happened. Get the boy ready for cryo. Tristan typed a quick message to let his employer know the location was compromised and send it to the agreed communication node. He didn't say where he was going, since that node was the most likely unsecured place. Unsecured point. Who was that? Alex asked. What was this about? A Merc after the boy. Wait, what was he still doing here? You began to visit maneuver before you did anything. How did you know it was a threat? That could have been our employer. Who's a spawning glunder human? I told you to get the boy ready. Just want to understand. It isn't like a few minutes going to make a difference. We're not flying any faster than when we're under cryo. Tristan's hands were closed on fist. Alex glanced at them, but instead of panicking, he looked at Tristan again and spoke calmly. If I understand what you saw that I didn't, I can react better next time. I'll know what to look for, and you won't have to wait until you get the scans to react. Tristan didn't relax, but the argument had some validity. While the human was around, it would be better if he didn't get in the way of stupid questions like that, like what he'd asked during the fight. And if he could anticipate what Tristan needed, even better. He opened his hand and brought up the scans of the other ship. Multiple screens lit up with them. This is a Valai Striker. It is fast. It can be set up with a variety of weapons. He looked at Alex and saw understanding there, but not recognition. Alex didn't know the ship. The first thing I noticed was the size. He tapped another screen. The Striker has a cockpit and 10 cubic feet of cargo. The next thing I noticed was the state of the hull. He indicated another scan, highlighting every scar, visible repair on the outside. He looked at Alex again. Okay. The voice was tentative. The size told you this wasn't our employer's ship. It was much bigger than that. But he has money. He dumped a lot of that at our feet like it didn't matter to him. So he could have hired someone to pick up the kid. It would be the smart thing to do, and another layer of separation between him and the kid. Tristan didn't smile, but he was pleased that giving time and starting information, Alex could come up with a valid conclusion. Our employer only hires the best, he said as much, and the quality of his bodyguards notwithstanding, I believe him when he said so. The thing about the best is that they take care of their equipment, and they also use the best. The Striker is an okay fighter, but it isn't the best. The Geartech Lance is better than this. And this ship has scars and bad repairs, so he didn't take good care of it. Tristan nodded, a common Merc. So, if it wasn't our boss or one of his representatives, by default, he didn't have good intention. How did he know where we'd be? That is the question. We know we didn't tell anyone where the meeting was. Tristan fixed his gaze on Alex. Right? I didn't tell anyone, I swear. Tristan believed him. Which means it's on my employer's side. Possibly he told someone he shouldn't have. More likely, the communication node was compromised. Does that explain everything to your satisfaction? Yes, thank you. Tristan pointed to the cockpit door. Then get the kid under cryo. He didn't bother hiding his annoyance. He turned to the control, and the comm let him know he had a message waiting. It was an automated message telling him the node he'd been trying to contact couldn't be found. Now, why would anyone want to keep him from contacting his employer? Is it over? The boy's voice, showing no trace of fear. Yes, Alex said it is. Were they bad men? Yes, but You don't have to worry about it. You don't have to worry anymore. We're safe now. They're going to try again. They want to hurt my father by hurting me. Tristan's ears went up, and he turned to face the door. He couldn't see them, but he could see the open door to the room. The boy knew he could be used against his father. Why would you say that? My father explained it to me in one of the messages. It's why I was at the academy, so I'd be safe. Don't worry. No one's going to hurt you. I'll make sure of that. Now, you need to go in cryo again. Tristan stood. The anger surprised him. What was that human doing, telling such a blatant lie to the boy? He couldn't be so stupid as to think letting a child think he was safe would do him any good. Alex exited the room and stiffened on seeing him. Emil Zander, you lied to him. Tristan's voice was cold. I didn't. Tristan crossed a space and got in Alex's face. You told him no one was going to hurt him. Alex opened his mouth, but no word came out. He looked away. It's just a kid. And the universe is supposed to care? Tristan remembered the beating. He could still feel them. Feel the pain his father inflicted on him. Stop crying, boy. I'm just preparing you for the future. Life is just pain. The earlier you get used to that, the better. Don't just lie there. Fight back. Children have a right to think they're safe. They have the right to be ready for what's coming. There's someone out there who's going to use him. You think he's going to be gentle about it? Fine. Fire flashed in Alex's eyes. You really want to have to deal with a freaked out kid? That's what's going to happen if I go in there and tell him he's got nothing but pain to look forward to. At least while he's here, he's going to be safe. I'm going to see to that. While he's under my protection, no one is going to hurt him. Tristan bared his teeth. How certain of that are you? That concludes chapter 19 of The Used Child. If you are enjoying this, please leave a like. If you want to know when the next chapter is going to be up, subscribe and hit the bell. If you want to read the book as well as the other one in the series, they are available on all major e-retailers. If you want to support me and get access to just about everything else I've written, that's on my Patreon. And if you want to listen to me do these live, it's every Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time on Twitch. The links are in the notes. And with that, I shall wish you a good day.